June 28, 1975, Barbara Curtis, sister of 15-year-old Susan Curtis, reports Sue missing with Brigham Young University, gone since 7 p.m. the following night from a youth conference banquet in the Wilkinson Center on BYU campus, Provo, Utah. Susan, a 10th grade student at Woods Cross High in North Salt Lake City, with no question had a troubled adolescence, with outside factors creating a destructive force in her and her family's lives. Family members report that in the year before her disappearance, she had struggled with suicide attempts and had been the ongoing victim of sexual assault from a powerful adult figure in her life, a gym coach at South Davis Junior High in North Salt Lake City. It's true that for many years, and perhaps still to this day, authorities and family members certainly were looking at this person in her absence until 6 p.m., 1 hour before his scheduled execution. Ted Bundy told Assistant Superintendent Pete Turner that he had abducted her and left her body in the desert south of Price, near US 6 and US 191 on the highway to Green River, Utah. Because of the high media profile afforded Bundy with his final days en route to the electric chair at Stark Prison, Stark, Florida, law enforcement seemed to have given the news outlets only pieces of his confession regarding Susan's final resting place, so that people would not trample evidence or try and interrupt search parties in the Carbon County desert. Volunteer search teams from all over the country, headed up by Salt Lake County Sheriff's Department and the Carbon County Sheriff's Department, began the hopeful yet wintry mission, anticipating a metal detector signal from Susan's new braces mounted in her mouth in May, the month before her abduction. Only finding scraps of radio belt from old tires, beer cans, and shell casings, volunteer police agencies continued the hunt with cadaver dogs. Because of the deep blanket of snow on the fields east of US 6, south of Price, after Bundy's January 24, 1989 execution, and his murky directions for her remains, law enforcement were forced to stall the pursuance until the following spring. In the decades to follow, family members and cold case detectives have searched the fields and hills with guidance from psychic mediums, helicopters, and on-foot investigation teams to no avail. Bundy's vague instructions of 5 to 10 miles south of Price, road to the left, 200 yards down a dirt road, with her remains 50 yards off the track, were of little help. With Bundy volunteering a confession of Susan's abduction 14 years after her vanishing, no Utah map available at his confession, and the anxious communication 1 hour before his death made any attempt to find Susan exponentially discouraging. Prior to Susan's vanishing, she had been spending much of her summer away from family with a close friend's family in Centerville, a suburb community north of Bountiful, just off of I-15 heading towards Farmington, Clearfield, Layton, and eventually the city of Ogden. Susan and her family were deeply at odds, but in an attempt to find peace, she was picked up by her sister Barbara on June 24th, who with her parents were attempting to bring Susan back into the family fold by arranging her registration and attendance at the youth conference at BYU in Provo on Friday, June 27th through the weekend. Susan was to stay the night at another member of Orchard Youth's ward that Barbara and Susan were both members of, Lynette Stringer. Lynette would also be Susan's roommate at the Helleman Hall Female Dormitory, specifically the Merrill Hall building in room 2121 on the second floor. The sisters and Lynette were to join the other kids in the Orchard Youth Ward for a large group ride on bicycles, beginning at the Orchard Steak Building in North Salt Lake at 3599 South Orchard Drive, west to Redwood Road. South through West Valley City, Taylorsville, South Jordan, around the point of the mountain in Bluffdale, where the Utah State Prison sits, the 2B temporary home of Bundy through parts of 1976 during his 90-day diagnostic, and ultimately staying at Summer Resort Saratoga Springs on the northwestern tip of Utah Lake. The following day, the group crossed I-15, riding through the suburbs of Orem and Provo, before arriving at their destination at BYU Provo on Friday, June 27, 1975. During the ride with multiple ward members, close friends of Susan, Debbie Assay, reported during the ride that Susan complained of stomach problems as well as feeling suicidal. When checking in at BYU sometime in the mid-morning, Barbara, Susan, and Lynette settled into their rooms. Reports unclear if Barbara stayed in 2121 with Susan and Lynette. The girls with others soon attended the youth conference activities, including church classes, then dinner in the main hall of the Wilkerson Center. Susan complained that she had food stuck in her new braces and would return to room 2121 at Merrill Hall Northwest across the campus, wearing a yellow evening gown. When officers looked through the dorm room, there was exactly $21 in a jewelry box on a dresser, jeans and other clothes folded and hanging in the closet with several pairs of shoes, a pendant and ring that apparently Susan would never be without. When Susan did not return to the banquet at about 1800 hours, she went to the apartment and found that her sister's toothbrush was dry and unused, suspecting that Susan never made it across campus from the Wilkerson Center. Because of her history of running away, according to the Curtis family, BYU and Provo PD investigated the case locally, with many witnesses claiming to have seen her in town and on campus. For example, Susan was seen selling books to students on campus for particular classes, hitchhiking in the Provo, Orem, and Spanish Fork area, and even hiking up by the Y on the mountain commonly called Y Mountain directly to the east of the football field. Because of Bundy's clear penchant for lying to investigators about details of missing girls and their whereabouts, is it possible that he simply knew about her disappearance from local newspapers and news stations? It was certainly in the newspapers and on the evening news on July 4th, 1975, when released from law enforcement. Was he keeping this information as a gambling chip with execution administration? That would mean a certain amount of foresight, making this unlikely, although not impossible, as he certainly could have been researching the disappearance from the period that he lived in the area. Could the gym coach be responsible, although he was never convicted in regard to her disappearance? We will likely never know, and it's highly unlikely that we will ever find Susan or her remains.
She was telling me that that you grew up in Bountiful and you knew Trish Kent and Susan Curtis a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. They were both my age. Trish lived further away from us. Sue lived in my neighborhood, about a block away from me.
So you actually rode with her in a group down to BYU that day, huh? Or the day before?
Right. Well, yeah, it was, and I'd have to think the sequence of it, but we rode from North Salt Lake, Bountiful, whatever, down Redwood Road to Saratoga, stayed there overnight, and then went to BYU the next morning.
What is Saratoga?
It's north, kind of.
Saratoga.
It's just north.
Saratoga used to be back in the day. It was a little resort area at the end of Utah Lake.
Oh, okay.
Where right now it's called Saratoga Springs now.
Okay.
But yeah. It was a hot pool and just a little resort area right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you stayed the night there and.
Right, and then went to BYU the next day for the youth conference, and we were there for a few days. Okay. And I just, it was just like I told your wife. It was a day when we had outside activities, and then all of a sudden Sue came up missing, and of course. She was just trying to come back into the group and back into the church and things. And so, we kind of felt like she maybe had a friend come by and pick her up. Or she just left on her own.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't comfortable. All of those things were being talked about at the time when she came up missing. Yep.
Oh,
yep.
yeah.
During the day.
Wow.
Everybody was doing their thing and just big groups of activities, and then she just came up missing. And, we actually hung out when we were real young. She came over to our school in 6th grade, and that's when I got to know her.
Right.
So we kind of hung out as a group, and Sue was part of that group.
Oh, okay.
And so, Trish and Sue were good friends early on. They kind of, because of Sue's troubles and everything, I think that friendship kind of got distant.
Yeah.
The older we were,
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think, really, the age we were, I don't know, were we 15 at the time? Something like that? I'm trying to remember now.
And I think when she disappeared, it's my understanding she was about 15.
Yeah, I think that's what we were, was 15.
Okay.
But, Sue was pretty mature for her age, and that's really where the trouble came with the coach. But, the thing is that we had all the hope in the world that she was, coming back, and then that happened, so it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's too bad.
So,
How many kids do you think went on the bike trip?
that was a big group that we had. I would only, back then I'm trying to think of it, but it was a pretty big group of, 60, 75 kids or so, maybe. I had to be at least that, I think.
Did you guys have like a special name for that group? I know you guys were going down to BYU all together. But
no, it was just it was our stake for our church.
Oh, okay.
And it was a youth conference that we were doing.
Okay, yeah. Which stake house was it?
At that time, I think we were the Bountiful, Utah stake.
Okay. All right.
Or was it the Orchard? You know what? I can't remember. It's changed, so I don't know if it was the Orchard stake or the Bountiful, Utah stake. And I honestly, I can't remember at that time.
Sue Curtis, looks like she was going to Woods Cross High when they interviewed her.
Okay.
Regarding this is in 75.
Okay.
His work. He back then they handled stuff different. He had agreed, and he was ordered by the court or something to leave Sue alone. He secretly, she ran away. He flew her to Phoenix and put her in a hotel and screwed her for a week or so, and then left. So through all of that, Sue was pretty messed up. I mean, you can, well,
yeah, you can imagine. Yeah,
she'd run away a couple of times. She was just a mess, and so she had agreed with her sister that she would come to this youth conference. So she's here. It's a Saturday. They're in the Wilkinson Center having a dinner, and she had new braces. They'd just been installed, as I put it. She told her sister she was going to go back to the dorm room in Helaman Halls to clean her teeth. And that was it.
Because her sister lived there.
Well, her sister was going to the same youth conference. That whole stake was...
They were all staying in those dorms.
In the dorms.
Okay,
yeah.
I gotcha.
So, let's see. So this is in June of '75. And so she doesn't show up again, obviously. And so she's reported as missing. And where we lost, as I put it, as I think, as I've gone over this 100 times, where we lost some quick ground was became the suspect. Because Bountiful had worked this case on him and had arranged for her under one of her friend's names to get a pregnancy test because she thought she was pregnant.
And back in those days, you probably had to go to a physician. Yeah. You couldn't just,
And so people in this department, and Bountiful too, they just made this quantum jump of had her killed.
Yeah.
Or killed her. Whatever.
Right.
So they spent a lot of time. The lead detective of this department, Dan Clark, was lead investigator on the case. He was also a polygrapher, and he polygraphed. And there was, you should never. Well, nowadays you wouldn't let the lead investigator run the polygraph.
Right.
Because you can kind of see as you read the narratives and that Dan was biased towards being the perp, and so Dan notes in the polygraph results that basically flunked, So they stayed very, very focused on
for a long time.
And they looked at Bundy and just other things, but they lost a lot of traction, in doing that. And
so they were looking at Bundy on the side originally.
Yeah, but not
really.
Let's see.
Maybe not so actively because they had their eye on.
Yeah, they thought they had. See, what happened is this girl that Sue gives the name of her friend.
Yeah.
Who didn't know about this.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Well, the results gets mailed to the friend's parents.
Oh, no.
And so that's things came across. So it looks like he was a coach at South Davis Junior High.
South Davis.
Yeah. So they just focus on. I mean, they do a lot of work with Bountiful.
Yeah.
So I mean, they even they hire a psychic.
Wow.
I mean, they're trying everything.
You're right.
In this. And then, Bundy does. You've probably read this. Bundy. This is the Sue Curtis paragraph.
Yes.
And you've read that.
Yeah.
And so, when they got this, the sad part about this was the detectives here got this in pretty short order after Bundy made this statement. The Curtises never found out about it. They found out about it on TV.
Oh, wow.
And that was really sad.
Yeah.
That was poor police work.
And this would have been, in '89, just before the execution. Yeah, and so they waited all these years and they find out about this on TV.
Yeah. That's one reason they moved out to Price. They spent a lot of time in those.
Combing around the hills.
So when this all came to light, then there was all the county out there, officers from here, cadaver dogs. I mean, they went out and did a lot of work out there. In fact, a couple of years ago, there's Dave Bennett's a deputy at Utah County and used to work here, and he flies search and rescue for the county, and so he and I got a wild hair and we went flying over that area. We said, let's just fly it and read this, and let's, and see if it makes any sense,
Right.
All we got out of that is I puked my guts out when we were landing. But there's always a possibility. Ted Bundy was a pathological liar.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
And this wasn't big news, but there were some news articles about Sue. There's always that remote chance Bundy played this one up and didn't do it.
Yeah.
I think it was because of that when I met with Sue's parents to get the DNA swabs and all of that, they shared a lot of things with me that aren't in this report. And obviously, you can't ever say Leo didn't do it in some way.
Yeah.
That would be stupid to just cross him out of the picture.
I guess there's always the remote chance that Bundy knew about this missing girl,
Sure, yeah.
And he just played that up.
Now, I doubt it, and that's why I think it was on my second visit with them to actually get the swabs, and I forget how the conversation went, but basically I had found that's how it went. I got into our database and I found his name, and so I had mentioned to them that he lived. I think he lives in Utah County.
He's still in the area. Yeah.
So basically it was this kind of a tacit agreement of I'll go talk to them. I felt it was worth it for them, for nothing else. So I found where he lived. He lives in a real upscale part of Orem, and by now this guy's probably late 70s, or no, he's in his 80s.
Wow.
So anyway, I knock on the door, and this little kid comes to the door, and I asked for the parents, the homeowner, and this little kid says, "Well, no, they're not home, but Grandpa is." And that came together pretty fast.
You knew he was older.
So I said, "Well, can I talk to your grandpa?" So he comes to the door, and he's a pretty squared away guy. I mean, he's got all his mental faculties all put together and everything. And I just said to him, I was in uniform, and I went there on purpose in uniform, and I said, "Mr. I talked to you out here. I don't think you want your grandkids hearing what we're going to discuss." And
yeah.
He was very polite, stepped out, and I just said, I've been working on Sue's case. You had an affair many years ago with her. He said, "I did." And so we discussed that in brief, and then I just point blank said, "Did you kill her?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Do you know who killed her?" And, "No." And I said, "Do you know where her body is?" He said, "No." Well, I kind of signed off with the whole thing. I said, I gave him my business card. For him, and I told him, I said, if you want to file a complaint about my conduct being here, here's who I am.
By approaching, yeah.
But I left him the card. My intent was, is if he did do it or had something and he had a back to Jesus moment,
yeah,
he'd call me.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty slim that, you know, I don't, but for me it was worth a shot.
Yeah.
You know? And so it really goes back. I find it interesting that they never recovered. I mean, Debbie. I mean, none of these kids from Utah. You know?
Nancy Wilcox too.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, Bundy's MO. I mean, the only reason I did the DNA thing in that is because there could be out in Price, somebody finds a sliver of a bone.
Yeah,
you know?
It happens.
And I think we owe that to her parents.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
In fact, I got a call from Las Vegas coroner's office, or Emmy's office, a couple of months ago, and you know they're always running a database. You know, they check with the Exploited Children database.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one that matched the physical characteristics.
Oh, interesting.
The body that, you know, that they had found and everything. But luckily with DNA now, see, I mean, back then DNA, you know, couldn't spell it.
Yeah, it was non-existent.
And we have, luckily, there's her dental when she got her braces put on.
Oh, interesting.
So what we did is, I have a neighbor that's just retired from Utah Valley Regional. It was X-ray. Anyway, we got this all digitized, you know, now. And so, again, that's in NCIC now. It's interesting that when I got looking at this case and getting ready, preparing it to send to these people in California, or in D.C. rather, she was not in NCIC still.
Oh, okay.
But, and come to find out, it was common back then, okay, somebody confesses they murdered somebody, even though they never recovered the body, they just took them out of NCIC.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, it's not anybody's fault, it's just how they did business back then.
Yeah.
So she now I've got her back in NCIC, her DNA's in NCIC, her dental, you know, and all of that. So it's, and yet I know it's extremely remote that we'll ever find her.
Yeah.
But we owe it to the parents.
I think that's really valid, and people are found out in the hills all the time.
Yeah. I just drove by Price. A week ago, I went out to Denver we went out to see my daughter and her family.
Yeah.
In fact, there's not a time I don't drive through that little corridor there of that you look out there. He could, sometimes he buried them. Other times he just put some foliage over them and went back and played with them again. My theory is that some animals probably got her, and she's.
Yeah.
But even then, if there's a sliver out there of a bone or anything, it would be nice someday,
And then the DNA would be there available to test that. Yeah, I think that's valid.
But you can see she was so messed up. I mean,
do you mind if I look at this?
At first blush, everybody assumed she had run away from this youth conference.
Right.
And a runaway at that time, again, we do business, especially this police department, with missing. Anybody comes up missing on this campus, especially a child.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes priority. They just, they made some quick assumptions because she had run away before.
Yeah. Oh, she had had past runaway experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, this was screwed her up so bad. I mean, he made a mess of her.
And he took her to Phoenix when she was 14 prior to this, right?
Well,
that was...
it was, so this is June. So this was recent. I mean, yeah, see, I had been under a court order to have no contact with her and everything. This is June. This is in June of '75.
Mm-hmm.
That he flew her to Phoenix.
Shortly before she went missing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So you can see.
Yeah. You can really see why they were pointing the finger.
Oh, yeah.
At him.
Oh, yeah.
That makes
I mean,
complete sense.
It was just, and I'm sure you know, I mean, one rule of thumb in this business is don't get too focused, you know.
Yeah.
Especially in the early part of a homicide investigation, or in this case, missing. But yeah, she gets out there. He spends a bunch of time with her at a hotel and that. I think he has a sister or something out there. And then he comes back. She stays. She goes to a relative or something, and finally she agrees to come home. And so she comes home, and that's when, you know, her sister talks her into going to this youth conference. So she reluctantly goes. I think if I remember right, she rode her bike.
I read that 50 miles apparently. Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, she was in pretty good shape. I think she probably would have been a little bit of a handful for Bundy if she had had the opportunity. But who knows? You know,
physically more capable of.
So she comes here with all this baggage of, you know, and so that's, you know, I can't throw too many rocks at the guys who first worked this case. It had all the, I mean, it was there.
Right.
Yeah, you know, they did the court order. Now, you know, and the pregnancy test and all this came together, and so they just homed in.
And it was a week before that they were in Phoenix, and yeah, I mean, I could totally see why they did.
Yeah. And I think the reality of it is, you know, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but Ted Bundy, his M.O., he picked her up off this campus. He probably killed her that night.
He probably did.
And it was probably, I wouldn't doubt that night he took her to up near Price somewhere, and dumped her off as he describes it. And, you know, and he's a necrophiliac, so he's doing his thing.
We're and some of the information that we're figuring out about him, or we're finding out, is that he had possibly had a trailer on some property in Fairview, and as you go up Price Canyon, as you know, you can bounce down that Fairview direction out there. That's a possibility as well.
So that, if he has a trailer up in that area, that explains why he went up that way.
I was told, okay, so Laura Amy was the girl that disappeared from American Fork on Halloween night in '74. Her body was found in Timpanogos Canyon, just past about 1,500 feet down by the creek, and she was discovered by some hikers, and she was down naked by the river. She was originally from Fairview, and apparently he, according to her friends, he had been down there stalking her for quite some time in American Fork.
Oh, really?
She was from Fairview originally. I talked to a guy named Ira Beals. He was an investigator in Bountiful, and he was on the Debbie Kent case. And he still lives up there, but I spoke to him on the phone. And he said, you know, I was just down in, he's originally from the Fairview area, and he said that he went to a family reunion or something down there, and he ended up talking to a girl he went to high school with. And she said, oh, yeah, I remember seeing him down there a lot. I remember he had a trailer down there somewhere. And there's a lot of things pointing kind of loosely pointing in that direction.
Oh,
Nothing concrete.
Well, but if that's true, then I mean, he could have dumped her anywhere. Anywhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, and when you read, and you know, he's such a
the pathological liar. Absolutely.
You know, it's look, it's between Price and Green River.
Right.
Well,
I mean, yeah, that's huge.
About 10 miles south of Price, a road going south. You know, I mean, when we flew that area, oh my goodness,
that's an enormous piece of property.
and there are mines, shafts mining out there.
Dirt roads leading.
Yes, you know, I mean, so no, I didn't know that he had some connections out that way.
Apparently, I mean, this is all hearsay, but these are things that I'm hearing, you know, and so it's kind of interesting, yeah.
Come on! I want to see y'all out of those graves and on the dance floor!